Records indicate that long before the name became globally known, there were quiet movements in legal offices, private terminals, and sealed rooms where decisions were made without public scrutiny. According to court filings and contemporaneous reporting, warnings existed, allegations circulated, and yet consequences were delayed. The question that continues to surface is not only what happened, but who was shielded from accountability, and why that protection appeared to endure for so long. Reports suggest that the earliest complaints were treated as isolated incidents rather than parts of a larger pattern. According to records, those complaints moved slowly through systems designed to process them, yet somehow stalled at critical points. Paperwork was filed, interviews were conducted, and then momentum faded. The silence that followed was not sudden, but procedural, shaped by decisions that appeared routine on the surface. Documents indicate that legal negotiations took place behind closed doors, framed as practical solutions to complex problems. According to available records, these negotiations resulted in outcomes that limited exposure and restricted further inquiry. The language used was technical, careful, and narrow, focusing on jurisdiction and process rather than scale or impact. In that narrowing, larger questions remained unanswered. Reports suggest that influence operated quietly, not through overt commands, but through familiarity and access. According to investigative accounts, meetings occurred in offices where power was understood without being spoken. Phone calls were returned quickly. Doors opened without delay. The difference between an ordinary defendant and a connected one was not written into law, but it appeared in how the law was applied. According to records, some officials later described constraints, citing limited evidence or unclear authority. Others pointed to agreements already in place, documents already signed. Each explanation stood on its own, plausible in isolation. Together, they formed a structure in which responsibility was diffused and accountability became difficult to assign. Reports suggest that media attention briefly pierced this structure, forcing names and allegations into public view. According to archived coverage, this attention created pressure, but it was uneven and temporary. Stories surfaced, then receded, replaced by other crises, other headlines. In the absence of sustained focus, the underlying system remained intact. Documents indicate that victims continued to speak, sometimes repeatedly, often without response. According to testimonies, these accounts were consistent in their descriptions, yet inconsistencies were emphasized to undermine credibility. The standard applied was exacting, while the benefit of doubt flowed in only one direction. Reports suggest that settlements and non-disclosure provisions played a central role. According to legal experts, such mechanisms are common, but in this case, their breadth and secrecy raised concerns. By design, they limited public knowledge and discouraged further reporting. Silence became a condition of resolution. According to records, law enforcement agencies were aware of constraints imposed by earlier decisions. Jurisdictional boundaries were cited, authority was deferred. Each step was framed as adherence to procedure, even as the overall effect was inaction. The system appeared to move, but only within carefully drawn lines. Reports suggest that social proximity mattered. According to accounts, associations with influential figures created an atmosphere of caution. Decisions were weighed not only for legal merit, but for potential consequences beyond the courtroom. In such an environment, risk avoidance could outweigh pursuit of truth. Documents indicate that when renewed investigations emerged, they faced resistance that was subtle rather than explicit. According to internal communications later released, concerns about resources, priorities, and precedent were raised. None of these objections denied the seriousness of allegations, yet together they slowed progress. Reports suggest that accountability was repeatedly deferred to another time, another office, another authority. According to records, this deferral created gaps where responsibility dissolved. Each actor operated within a defined role, and within those boundaries, decisive action was rare. According to investigative findings, the narrative presented publicly often differed from the one discussed privately. Public statements emphasized resolution and closure. Private discussions acknowledged unresolved issues and lingering doubts. The contrast between these narratives widened over time. Reports suggest that the eventual resurgence of scrutiny disrupted established expectations. According to court documents, previously sealed materials became relevant again. Names reappeared. Timelines were re-examined. The questions that had been postponed returned with greater urgency. According to records, reactions varied. Some expressed surprise, others defensiveness. Explanations were offered, often repeating earlier justifications. Yet the context had shifted. What once seemed procedural now appeared consequential. Reports suggest that institutional self-protection influenced responses. According to analysts, acknowledging failure carried reputational costs. In such cases, minimizing exposure could take precedence over transparency. The instinct to preserve credibility may have shaped decisions as much as legal reasoning. Documents indicate that the broader implications extended beyond a single case. According to experts, the patterns observed reflected systemic vulnerabilities. When influence intersects with discretion, outcomes can diverge sharply from ideals of equal justice. Reports suggest that unanswered questions persist not because evidence is entirely absent, but because pathways to resolution were constrained early. According to records, those constraints were rarely revisited. Decisions made in one moment continued to shape outcomes years later. According to testimonies, the emotional toll on those seeking answers was profound. Delays compounded harm. Silence reinforced isolation. The absence of acknowledgement became its own form of injury. Reports suggest that public understanding remains incomplete. According to released materials, significant portions of the historical record are still inaccessible. Sealed documents, redacted names, and unresolved claims leave gaps that invite speculation but resist confirmation. According to records, calls for transparency have grown louder, yet responses remain measured. Reviews are announced. Processes are cited. The pace remains deliberate. Reports suggest that the central question endures because it has never been fully addressed. Protection, in this context, did not require explicit orders or conspiracies. It emerged from alignment of interests, from caution, from silence, from systems functioning as designed. According to documents, the legacy of these decisions is ongoing. Trust in institutions is shaped not only by outcomes, but by perceptions of fairness. When protections appear uneven, confidence erodes. Reports suggest that understanding why protection occurred requires examining incentives as much as actions. According to analysts, risk, reputation, and relationships all influence decision-making within complex systems. According to records, no single moment explains everything. Instead, there is a sequence of choices, each defensible on its own, that together produced a durable shield. Reports suggest that as long as key questions remain unanswered, the story cannot conclude. According to available evidence, what is known points to deeper uncertainties rather than closure. According to records, the search for clarity continues, shaped by documents, testimonies, and the spaces between them. The silence that once prevailed is now contested, but it is not fully lifted. Reports suggest that the true measure of accountability lies not only in individual cases, but in whether systems adapt to prevent recurrence. According to observers, that adaptation remains uncertain. According to records, the past cannot be undone, but it can be examined. The protection that once operated quietly is now visible, if not fully explained. The reasons behind it remain a subject of scrutiny, debate, and unresolved concern. Reports suggest that until transparency replaces silence, the question of who was protected and why will continue to echo, unanswered, through documents still sealed and decisions still defended.